I worked about a year at sea. My routine was monotonous. I woke up with the sun, turning off the lighthouse, and when night fell, I would turn it back on. That's it. I was a lighthouse operator on a small island, located about 150 kilometers from the mainland. I took this job because of the peace, as well as it paid well, and I didn't have to worry about rent. The humid sea air was refreshing when it hit my face, and the birds sang around. Gradually, even the seagull's song could be good company. As you might imagine, it's the kind of routine that leaves a lot of free time. Apart from the occasional change in weather, some fog or low visibility, etc., I remained idle for most of the day, with little to no contact with people. I used an old radio to listen to some broadcasts, but it was difficult to pick up a signal. The internet was a bit scarce. I couldn't use more than 100 MB per day, which made me spend most of my time writing, drawing what I saw, getting to know the island, and so on. Speaking of which, here's a brief description. The island is a piece of wild land, about 9 square kilometers, with rocky cliffs that extend into the ocean, forming hidden coves and dark caves. The lighthouse, erected at the highest point of the island, is a sturdy structure made of red bricks, resistant to the furious winds that sweep the coast during storms. Around the lighthouse, there are green meadows dotted with wildflowers and twisted bushes. A winding trail meanders through the landscape, leading to cliffs and deserted beaches, where the sound of the waves blends with the silence of solitude. In my spare time, I explored every corner of the island, discovering its hidden secrets and appreciating the raw beauty of nature. Visits occurred every 2 months to bring supplies and such. Sometimes the frequency was higher when there was something that needed to be repaired. With each new visit, however, I felt stranger, as if I had become unable to converse with people, less sociable, more monosyllabic, but at the same time, anxious, waiting for the next time I would exchange 2 or 3 words with someone. When it happened, it had been 2 weeks since I last received a visit. The last few weeks passed slowly, as if time were dragging on at an even slower pace than usual. Each day seemed to merge into the next, and I found myself lost in my own thoughts, often catching myself staring at the distant horizon, longing to see some boat. Now I realized that fate wanted to be ironic with me. I was walking along the beach, as usual, 4 days ago. I did that every evening, when, as I passed the shoreline, I noticed something strange. Purposeful marks, footprints in the sand. They weren't mine. I stopped abruptly, examining them closely. They were definitely human, at least judging by the size. There's no animal around here with feet like that. My eyes scanned the beach for any sign of movement, following the tracks with my eyes, but they lost themselves on the horizon, stretching infinitely along the sand. An uncomfortable chill settled in my chest as I continued my walk along the beach, each step more cautious than the last, looking in all directions and following the footprints. I proceeded cautiously, each step weighing like lead on my feet. More and more, the feeling of being watched enveloped me, as if eyes were fixed on my neck. The footprints led me to a more remote part of the beach, where the rocks rose abruptly into steep cliffs, challenging the advance of the impetuous sea. The footprints disappeared at the base of these cliffs, as if their owner had jumped into the depths of the ocean. I bent down to examine the sand, but there were no signs of a return. The person, or whatever it was, had simply vanished. A shiver ran down my spine as I moved away from the cliffs, constantly looking over my shoulder with the feeling that something sinister was lurking. The night was approaching quickly, and the lighthouse began to emit its comforting glow over the landscape. Drizzles fell from the heavens, illuminated in the beam of light, while the deep sea seemed not to be affected by the photons, the water as dark as ever. I caught myself staring randomly while wandering in my thoughts. Was there anyone on the island? Maybe I was being silly. It could be a shipwreck survivor, a lost fisherman perhaps. Yes, it was possible, and their footprints disappeared because they returned to the boat. I decided I would investigate further the next day to see if there was anyone in danger. I fell asleep with the breaking of the waves on the shore, having a heavy but restless sleep. I dreamed that someone was knocking on the door, but no matter how much I walked, I couldn't reach it. The knocks became more insistent, almost desperate, but I kept on a loop of infinite steps. I woke up startled, the sun shining on my face. My heart raced as I remembered that I had to turn off the light. I did it, praying that no boat had passed by recently. I ate a hard piece of bread that I still had, put on my boots, and opened the door, but as I did, I stopped in place. My gaze led to the ground, revealed something that made my heart freeze. New footprints in the sand, fresh as dawn. They circled around the lighthouse, as if someone had been pacing around it during the night. And then they headed away from the structure. I swallowed hard, feeling a shiver run down my spine as I examined the footprints. I remembered the thought from the night before. Maybe the lost visitor had found the lighthouse and had tried to enter to warm up. Poor man. I climbed up to the radio to make a transmission. "Base, do you copy? Copy." The crackling voice sounded from the other side. "What's up?" "I believe I have a visitor," I replied, trying to remain calm, although my voice betrayed a slight tremor. "A visitor? There on the island?" The voice on the other side of the radio sounded surprised. "Yes, I found fresh footprints on the beach this morning. It seems someone was prowling around the lighthouse during the night." My words came out hurriedly as I stared at the footprints through the window. "I think it might be a lost fisherman, maybe a castaway. I contacted to inform, to see if you guys knew anything." The transmission fell silent for a moment before the response finally came through the radio. "Understood. We'll check if there have been any reports of disappearance or shipwreck in the area. Stay alert there and let us know if you need anything. Are you safe?" "Yes, I'm fine," I replied, although I didn't feel so secure, just a little concerned about who might be lurking around here. "I'm going out to see if I can find out who made them, and don't worry, I'll take my gun for safety." After hanging up the radio, I stood there, staring at the footprints in the sand as if they could give me answers. I began to trace the path while the lighthouse moved further and further away from me. With the sun already high in the sky, I plunged into the trail following the footprints in the sand, my gun firmly gripped and my eyes attentive to every movement. The heat beating down on my skin contrasted with the ice that had settled in my chest since I discovered the footprints. The trail meandered through the rugged landscape of the island, leading me through twisted bushes and sharp rocks. It led to the heart of the island. I became worried. I had only been there twice myself. It's full of insects and some potentially dangerous animals, especially for someone who could be injured or debilitated. However, as I approached the clearing, I began to hear a sound in the distance. It sounded like music. When I got close enough, I could recognize it. It was old, very popular. The first verse I identified said, "I don't want set the world on fire." The recording was dirty, with a lot of static. When I finally emerged in the clearing, I saw a radio, buried halfway, only one of its speakers sticking out while it played, "I just want to start a flame in your heart." My mind was full of questions, but a sense of alertness kept me focused. I lifted the radio carefully, looking around, ready for any sign of movement. The music continued to play, filling the clearing with its distorted melody. Now the idea of a shipwreck made sense. Maybe a ship with some items like this, I was thinking, when suddenly I heard a sound echoing in the distance, echoing through the trees and making the birds fly away. A long scream, definitely a human scream. My heart raced at the sound of the scream echoing through the clearing. A chill ran down my spine as my eyes frantically searched for the source of the sound. The distorted music from the radio now seemed like a sinister soundtrack to that anguished scream. I started running back to the lighthouse. After the scream repeated a few more times, I realized it wasn't exactly a scream of pain. It was strange, different. Every fiber of my being clamored for safety as I ran back to the lighthouse, my mind spinning with all the terrifying possibilities that could be lurking on the island. The human scream, mixed with the distorted music, echoed in my ears, filling me with indescribable agony. The feeling that something sinister was unfolding around me made me quicken my pace, my muscles tense and my eyes constantly scanning the terrain for any sign of danger. Finally, I reached the lighthouse, my breath ragged and my legs trembling. I closed the door behind me, locking it carefully as if that could protect me from whatever was out there. With trembling hands, I picked up the radio radio and turned it on again, desperately needing contact with civilization somehow. "Base, this is the lighthouse operator," I began, my trembling voice echoing through the small lighthouse room. I heard a scream. It sounds human. Also, I found a radio in the forest, playing music. "I don't know what's going on here, but I think it might be dangerous." There was a pause on the other end of the line before the familiar voice of the base operator responded. "Understood. We're monitoring the situation. Please stay where you are and stay safe. We've sent a boat to check what's going on. Just stay calm. We're on our way." The words were a small comfort, but the sense of imminent danger still weighed on me like an oppressive cloak. I sat in a chair, gripping the radio tightly, the minutes dragging on as I waited, desperately waiting for the rescue to arrive. My thoughts oscillated between growing fear and suffocating anxiety, my heart pounding in my chest with a terrifying intensity. The sun had already set. I had turned on the light, looking regularly, hoping to see the silhouette of the vehicle approaching, when a sharp sound echoed through the air, a sound that made my blood run cold in my veins. It was the same anguished scream I had heard before, but this time it was much closer, much more real. I looked out the window, my heart pounding hard as I tried to locate the source of the sound. That's when I saw, with difficulty on the beach below the lighthouse, a dark figure moving among the shadows, its awkward and irregular steps. A wave of horror washed over my body as I realized it was coming here. Fear paralyzed me as I watched the figure, its erratic movements filling me with pure dread. I knew then that there was no more time to wait for rescue. I had to defend myself. I pulled my gun into my hands and waited, sitting in a chair facing the door, pointing the barrel of the pistol, just waiting for it to open the door. Everything became strangely quiet. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks was deafening, echoing inside the lighthouse as I waited, my ragged breath resonating in the silent room. Every second seemed like an eternity, and the tension in the air was palpable. My muscles were tense, ready to act at the first sign of danger. Then it happened. A sharp thud cut through the air as the lighthouse door shook. Another thud. My heart raced as I held my gun tightly, fingers trembling with tension. Another thud on the door echoed through the lighthouse, followed by the ominous sound of the scream, now much clearer. My thoughts spun in uncertainty of what to do. With the persistent thuds, however, the latch gave way, causing the door to swing open and slam against the wall with violence. On the other side, my God, it was something indescribable. It seemed vaguely human. Sticky hair cascaded over its shoulders, its skin peeling and wrinkling in places. It had prominent nails on cracked and injured fingers, and its mouth was permeated by scattered and broken teeth protruding from the gums. Who are you?" My voice came out in a trembling whisper, my hands shaking as I held the gun. There was no response. It remained motionless, watching me with unseeing eyes from the darkness. A sense of pure terror seized me as I realized there was no trace of humanity in that gaze, just a deep and frightening void. I'm armed," I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm me. "I'll shoot if you don't get out of here now." The figure remained inert for another moment before taking a step forward, its body lurching into the lighthouse. I felt a desperate panic engulf me as I squeezed the trigger, firing the gun with a deafening roar. The bullet sliced through the air with a sharp whir, passing through the figure and lodging into its leg. A guttural sound escaped from its lips, a sound that chilled me to the core. It lurched towards me with terrifying speed, its movements awkward and irregular as if possessed by some supernatural force. I backed away, my mind screaming with terror as I desperately tried to get away from that thing. The lighthouse room seemed to have shrunk around me, its boundaries closing in on my mind as I struggled to find a way out. Then, in a moment of pure agony, my hand found the lighthouse's emergency lever. Without hesitation, I pulled it, activating the deafening alarm that echoed across the island like a cry for help. The creature recoiled, its ears seeming to hurt from the shrill sound, its movements recoiling into a fetal position. It was enough to give me a precious advantage. I ran towards the exit, my heart pounding with wild ferocity in my chest, the salty sea air filling my lungs as I moved away from the imminent danger. The alarm continued to blare behind me, cutting through the silence with its deafening cacophony. I ran along the winding trail that snaked through the island, my feet pounding against the uneven uneven ground as I desperately sought a safe place to hide. Behind me, I could hear the creature's heavy footsteps, its grunts of pain mixed with anger as it relentlessly pursued me through the rugged landscape. I knew I couldn't run forever, that eventually my weak legs would give in to exhaustion. I needed to find a way to resolve this. That's when I spotted a hidden cove, sheltered by tall cliffs of rock. In the distance, I could make out when the rotating light of the lighthouse briefly illuminated the approaching rescue boat. It was the perfect chance. Without hesitation, I ran, hope igniting in my chest as I glimpsed a possible escape route. The creature was almost upon me, its heavy steps echoing as I neared the edge of the cove. With one last effort, I threw myself over the cliff, plummeting towards the churning sea below. The wind cut my face as I fell, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks filling my ears. For a moment, I felt like I was flying, free from the terror that pursued me, but then the water came to engulf me, the force of the impact sending sharp pain through my spine. I sank into the dark depths of the ocean, air escaping from my lungs as I struggled to reach the surface. Finally, I emerged from the depths, gasping for air as I fought against the turbulent currents. I looked up, seeing the silhouette of the island against the dark night sky. The creature was there, its distorted form looming over the cliff's edge, and then it mimicked me, plunging into the water. Horror overtook me as I desperately swam towards the approaching rescue boat. I blew frantically into the whistle I had, attracting the attention of the crew, who soon aimed their flashlights at me as I struggled to keep my head above the tumultuous water. I turned back only to feel even more fear. That thing swam well, very well, its hands almost reaching me, making me see clearly the membranes between its fingers. Its eyes gleamed with anticipation, almost joy, and around its neck, something I can only compare to gills opened and closed. I felt a tug on my foot, nails digging into the skin, making me release the little air I had, in the form of a scream. It got me. I could hear the shouts of the boat's crew as they spotted me, in panic. I began to be pulled by it, heading straight towards its mouth full of teeth. I was staring at it, seeing the abnormally large jaw open, ready to sever my calf, when a dry snap cut through the night. I could barely process what had happened when a dark mark appeared on the monster's head. It soon turned into a green geyser, gushing that strange blood into the bullet hole. I looked at the boat, and there was my colleague with his gun pointed, the others throwing a lifeline in my direction. With renewed strength I swam, reaching the rope and grabbing it desperately. The men pulled with all their might, dragging me out of the water as the creature disappeared into the waves. I clung to the boat, trembling and exhausted, my heart still pounding uncontrollably in my chest. As we sailed away from the island, I looked back, watching the lighthouse gradually diminish on the horizon. A sense of relief flooded over me, but also an unsettling feeling that something terrible was still there, waiting. As we passed the coast, right in front of the lighthouse, I could see in the cabin the distorted, wet and wounded figure, its silhouette projecting sharp and accompanying us with its head. It probably realized that we had successfully escaped, and then, almost like a wolf, stood in that position they usually do to howl, and its scream echoed through the corners of the island and the sea, the men on the boat becoming terrified. I sank into the boat, trembling and sweating cold, my thoughts revolving around the terrible experience I had just gone through. I fell into a strange but restful sleep, given my exhausted state. I woke up on the mainland, greeted by a medical team that examined me with concern, tending to the wounds I had suffered in that escape. I told them about the creature, about what had happened, but they looked at me with skepticism, perhaps thinking I was suffering from exhaustion or hallucinations caused by stress and loneliness. However, even now, as I write these words safely, now working at the base, I know that what I experienced was real. I know because the men who were with me also saw it. I know because they deactivated that station, but didn't send anyone to collect the items. I know because the lighthouse's light still turns on at that point every night, and we always warn those who cross these waters that it's not a safe place.